Life is Strange Episode 2 is very difficult to review without posting potential spoilers, so I'm going to warn you in advance now. This review will contain spoilers, so if you're interested in buying the game, perhaps just go buy it and play it for yourself and see how things turn out. In the meantime though, have a look at this glitch from the toilet paper assassin at the start of the episode where I rewound time and kind of ended up phasing the door through her face and her arm, which would have naturally killed her because I was stood in the doorway, and it's a very unfortunate case. I don't think the game designer planned for you to be that close when rewinding the time, but I tend to do that in a few instances in my playthrough, at least. Now, this entire episode deals with some very strong themes such as depression, rape, drug abuse, suicide, and some other hard-hitting factors. Now, when I played through, I could feel from episode 1 already that Kate Marsh was having some difficult problems and was going out of my way to make sure that she was well looked after and cared for, and felt like Max was there for her. And although you do this, it makes a difference, but possibly not quite as much as I would feel, at least in this episode. Maybe in future episodes it has a tangent as to whether you saved her and were there for her, and whether you saved her and weren't there for her makes a difference. Possibly she goes home, possibly she's wrote out of the game entirely. Because if she is wrote out of the game entirely, stuck in hospital or goes home to her parents, after you've spent all this time and investment saving her and looking after her, I'd feel a bit cheated as well. Especially if, people who haven't saved her, it would kind of make it so there's a little difference. I would want there to be some difference, or a noticeable difference. Especially as Kate seems to be the key to the conviction of Nathan, because obviously she was another victim, and probably one of more moral grounds and more likely to be believed than, for example, Chloe is. And if you haven't got the party invite, even though I did get a party invite at the beginning of the episode, it seems, as with life, when it comes to actually making the party list, fickle nature is you might not end up with the actual invite, so I may have messed up at the table and possibly needed to rewind there to get the actual invite to the event. But maybe I could make some sort of influence outside of the party, who knows? Because whilst you could put yourself in a situation where you get caught at the party by Nathan and taken advantage of and rewind that to perhaps avoid certain difficult situations, outside of the party you might be given the choice to either hang out with Warren, depending on whether you've avoided him in a situation where he seems to come across as a stalker, or actively encouraged him, so, the love interest, depending on your playthrough. Of course, I've gone through, he seems to be more of a stalker sort of playthrough, because I try to avoid him for as much as possible, denying his excuses to go on dates and just been like, no, Warren. I'm trying to avoid talking to him as much as possible, but yet he still persists. And yes, that may have an influence, it may not. I believe it should make a difference if you're completely avoiding him, as to whether he goes with Max or ends up with the science geek who seems to be, let's say, keeping her eye on him, because she seems to be with him at all times and, angry at Max having his interests over herself. So maybe he will finally get the hint and end up with her rather than Max, if that is how you choose to play it. So the actual act of saving Kate herself comes down to the facts as to whether you've paid attention to things in her room, whether you note the proverb which has been highlighted or the proverb that has been scratched out makes a big difference, as does which family members you have noted care for her the most. So these are the main things that are involved, as opposed to actually answering her call or being there for her in previous episodes, which I would think would have made more of a difference. Of course, it hit me pretty hard that she did actually end up in the roof after doing everything you could to avoid it. But rewinding time, when she was arguing with the teacher, you could see exactly how Mr. Jefferson gaslighted her to go on the roof by saying, oh, aren't you just doing this for attention? Just own up and speak the truth and all this. He seems to have ulterior motives, so whether he is directly involved or just sticking up for Nathan as part of the high society and rich people because he's sort of in that clique of society, it's hard to say. I would say with his HDR, DVR camera that seems to be lying around, considering he's just a photo person and not a videographer. Maybe because he's teaching it could have an influence, but normally these people tend to stay in their own field, so having such a high quality DVR camera and the fact that Kate has this video out there on the internet, it kind of matches that he might be one of the people behind it, or even the person who's filmed it. Now, again, back to the case of the contradictory box files with the names of the girls on. That's the sort of things teachers have, as opposed to the security guard, and we've already looked around at the security guard's house. And there was no sign of the box files, so maybe it's Nathan's box files, maybe it's Mr. Jefferson's. I'm feeling Mr. Jefferson has a lot more involvement in the disappearance of Rachel Amber than you might initially think, because he did have a thing with Rachel and he has files on all of these girls that possibly are his videos and evidence of his involvement in the case. Maybe we get to go around this whilst everyone else at the party, while they're distracted at the party, we can go maybe with Kate, maybe with Chloe, and investigate that situation to help out for Kate's case rather than hang it out on a date with Warren. So perhaps if you chose to go on a date with Warren, you won't get to go investigate, or you get the choice to go investigate. Maybe you get to blow off the party even if you have a party invite and go investigate. It all comes down to choices and all comes down to how the episodes prevail. In my opinion, though, with the dealing of the issues of bullying and gaslighting and depression and suicide, it's turned out to be quite an award-winning piece of work because they have put a lot of effort into doing it and researching it and making sure that the emotions and the characters come across. And, for example, I got very attached to Kate Marsh because I do get attached to people with depression in society, in real life, and in literary memes. So, yeah, I was more emotionally attached than maybe I should have been, and you could hear that in episode 9. I tried to suppress it, but you could definitely hear my emotional distress, and that hit me hard for a few days, even with saving her life. So yeah, that would have been definitely a reset of the whole episode if I had have failed in that instance, just to make sure I got the guaranteed definite outcome that I wanted. The episode also deals with different characters in the Arcadia Bay scene. For example, there's the fisherman who's trying to maintain society as the drug dealer who was initially following Chloe around, but now he probably has more of an interest in us after having pulled a gun on him. And then there's the homeless lady who's choosing to stay in Arcadia Bay because it's her hometown, even though she could go elsewhere, but she was cheated out of life and that's the place she would rather be. So who's truly rich? The guy with the lottery ticket who's kind of offensive to everyone, who's like, back off, that's my lottery ticket. Or the lady who chooses to live in her own town, and although she got screwed over by everyone in the past, is actually living where she wants to be. Now, the end of the world is coming in both party form and the tornado, and yes, the scenes weren't there so much in the tornado in the triangle anymore, which everyone else thinks is the all-seeing eye, but it's probably the Vortex Club logo just graffitied everywhere. This might come into effect more in future episodes, it's hard to say at present, and I look forward to seeing the next episode where I hope they haven't written Kate Marsh out of it entirely, and I hope she's not just stuck in the hospital entirely, because after having gone through all that, you need some sort of payout that you saved her life and not just, oh, she's gone home to her parents now. That'd be very disappointing and very, very sad. I mean, especially going through all of that, it's just not what you want the outcome to be. And especially when you want to help her. So yes, I shall be planning on staying on her side in the future and helping her even more in the episodes. And I look forward to seeing how the last 3 episodes turn out and how different the playthroughs could be. Again, I disagree with the one thing on the roof where be strong is something you say to her that's the positive outcome, because that would gaslight someone on the roof, in my opinion. If they've gone to the roof and you're saying, oh, be strong, they'll just be like, I'm strong enough to actually go through with this, and then actually make them jump rather than convince them not to. But yeah, and I also think that you should have had more say with what you had. So people who ignored her call and that lot and just weren't there for her should have perhaps led to her just be in a lose condition altogether. Although I can see why they might not want that to happen. But then again, if they're doing it so you can win in those circumstances, being there for in all instances should have been a guaranteed win position and never had to go through that. But I can see why, with the freeze time mechanic, you would have wanted to go through that because they have to introduce that. And I'm glad that there are instances in the game where you are prompted to rewind, where you can discover things by rewinding, like listening to the teacher where you're not prompted, and how they've gone into explaining how in future episodes you'll need to pay attention more by going through the memory game thing. So yes, pay attention to things more. Now, there's also the introduction that you have limited amounts of rewind. So in future episodes, will there be a limited rewind power, so you can run out of rewind power, maybe not get to where you need to go, maybe you can freeze time and burn it out that way, and have choices as to whether you've frozen time and moved through it, or rewound and rewound and rewound until you've used it up. So will you get limited numbers of rewinds, limited rewind bar? It is very difficult to say, but I can imagine it could lead to some instances where you could definitely miss out on things that you are attempting to fix by rewinding too much or rewinding too late. So yeah, it all becomes very interesting where they will go with this mechanic, and I look forward to seeing just how far they push it. So this has been Life is Strange episode 2. Look forward to Life is Strange episode 3 in March with Chaos Theory, where things could be very different depending on how you've played so far. Goodbye.